Okay, so I want to put a trigger warning in this video before we get into this, but there have been some even more serious allegations that are hitting Dan Wooton, and I just want to put a trigger warning for the amount of conversation that I'm going to have in relation to different forms of abuse. Hey guys, it's Morali. Hopefully you guys are all doing well today. Back again with another video. If you have not subscribed, I would really appreciate it, guys. Click that button and subscribe. I give you guys content every single day, even on the weekends, guys, while everybody's partying away or relaxing. I'm constantly working every single day of the year, so please do subscribe. I really would appreciate it. It is daily and consistent content. Now, of course, Dan Wooton was rocked with allegations yesterday after somebody came forward in relation to finding tapes that were filmed without his consent or the other employee's consent, and that was sold off, that Dan Wooton was allegedly in charge of, and this was found behind a washing machine. All of this right now are currently allegations, but whilst that is being questioned, there are more allegations now, fresh allegations that Dan Wooton is facing after somebody has come forward, and he came forward last night at 11:30 p.m. and I would just like to read out what he has said because it is absolutely shocking. His name is Evan Sutherland, I believe, and he says Dan Wooton is a dangerous predator who drugged and aggressively R-worded me. Details are below. This is his reckoning. Sunday the 9th of November 2014 is a date that changed my life forever. This was the day I attended the MTV Music Awards in Glasgow. It was an evening that should have forever lasting great memories of a really enjoyable night. But that was not to be. This was the night, that I had met Dan Wooton. That was the night he first met the person he already knew, myself. At that point in my life, I was working as an escort, something I genuinely had to do at that moment in time to survive. Wow, sorry, that hit me differently because I can really relate to that. I genuinely had to do at that moment to survive, and the agony of that and having to disclose that is incredibly painful. Absolutely agree. Because I know exactly how it is viewed. Absolutely agree. By certain judgmental people out there. Absolutely agree. Hello. This can easily be seen as a quick way to try and instantly discredit someone. This dangerous man drugged and aggressively R-worded me in the most degrading way, calling me a worthless, nameless piece of shit. I want to make it clear that Dan came to my hotel room door and used his knowledge to gain entry into my room. Dan knew a lot about me on this chance encounter. We had never met before that night, although he had very briefly seen me in the lift going up to my room hours before. He had done his homework on a well-established escort at the time, which was very clear to me in the conversation that was taking place. This was not a booking and there was no exchange of money. I made it clear to Dan that I was on a personal night out and I was not here to do that. Information was in the public domain, some of the details were not, and some of what was said by him was so specific and related to one thing that it showed me that this man had researched me very deeply. I was convicted of extortion back in 2010, the details of which have never fully been exposed or explored to any great extent because of who were involved. But there are plenty of diluted news articles out there regarding this and videos of me discussing it online. It was a set of complex circumstances and how all of this started and transpired when I was a 15-year-old who ran away from care, which continued until I was 19. What I ask people to do is bear in mind that I was already in an abusive situation in my life where I was being exploited and abused by a different abuser. A man who was the very one who introduced me to all of this activity. I can completely relate to what this man is saying, by the way. I identified this man as my serial abuser because this was the person who had abused me for the most prolonged period of time. The reason I mention all of this is because it is entirely relevant to what Dan and I were talking about that night, and most importantly, I was threatened by an unknown individual the next day by someone clearly working on behalf of Dan, who called me to make it clear to me that I better never speak out on what happened to me. There was no doubt in my mind that Dan viewed me as a fair game target that night and saw me as a prey because of all that's mentioned. An abused young adult with a deeply troubled life through the care system who went on to get a point in the escort industry, a perfect candidate for a sexual predator. I was just seen as someone easily dismissible, no one would believe me, and most importantly, he made sure I got that message through this threatening call. I reported all of this to the police back in 2021 and still absolutely nothing has ever been done about it. I've been silenced before, discredited, disregarded, and never given any real opportunity to set the record straight about any of the numerous things that have happened to me. So you eventually just start to give up, and that's the place I now reside. Since I have reopened Pandora's box, I have hit the deepest, hardest depression I've ever felt in my entire life. I wrestled so much about going public and putting this out there about what Dan did to me, but I cannot stay silent anymore. Waiting for someone or something to happen that would contribute to justice being served is a helpless mindset. I have made many mistakes in my life and have been met with the consequences of those mistakes. It is about time that the people who actually did me wrong were held responsible as well, or at the very least, that information is widely known. The overall message I want people to take away reading this is that I will not be held hostage by Dan Wooton and what he did to me or my past that he blatantly used against me to keep this buried. I just want the truth out there once and for all. This is not some kind of tell-all. My life is deeply complex and the details covered here are important for people to know, so they can understand some of the context and how this complete spiderweb around me has been debilitated for so long. Finally, I'm telling it exactly how it is. This is the first-hand account and it is my words, and I just refuse to make this abuser's secrets my secrets. I am sick and tired of disgusting individuals getting away with doing the most evil acts and they are celebrated. This man is a R-word. My memory is his crime scene. I was there. It happened to me, and I know the full impact this has had. I pray that everyone who has been hurt by this vicious, foul man eventually finds some kind of healing. Writing this was beyond painful, Kevin Sutherland. So, this person has come forward with some shocking allegations in regards to Dan Wooton, which in my opinion are far worse allegations than anything we've discussed when it comes to Philip Schofield or Hugh Edwards. If we really want to keep it real, yes, lest we forget, Dan Wooton was very much the pioneer in fronting this conversation about Philip, and I'm glad that everybody had a conversation about him, but he also was the front runner in, talking about Caroline Flack and many other individuals who have come forward in the past couple of years to say that Dan has harmed them emotionally. Now we've had a very serious allegation by somebody coming forward saying that Dan Wooton has drugged them and allegedly R-worded them as well. I want people to really understand that going to the police doesn't really do anything in this day and age. The Met Police aren't as sufficient. They don't care about cases like this, stories like this, sex workers like this. They don't care in any capacity or the seriousness of it and let it just go, and they just throw it under the carpet. If we're talking about abuse of power when it comes to Hugh Edwards and when it comes to Philip, Dan is no other excuse, especially if you've got somebody else to phone him to say, make sure you can shut up. And I'm pretty sure there are other powers at bay right now, because this conversation about Dan Wooton, which is on fire on Twitter, is not being reported by The Sun or Daily Mail anywhere. And that's the police right now. They should just arrest this man. Right on damn time. But it's not been reported anywhere, which speaks volumes of this conversation. To be accused of such a heinous crime is significant and it's horrific. This is now somebody else coming out. You can't just assume that everybody is now lying. And I'm pretty sure there are going to be more people coming out with different allegations in regards to Dan Wooton. This is probably the beginning of what he has done to them. You can't sit here and just assume with blind fact or have, the majority of the probability that these men are lying. This is a very difficult story for somebody to come forward with, especially as a man in the society we live in today. It is very awful when it comes to sex workers, especially the life that this person has lived is something that I can very much relate to, being homeless, or being in a position where you have to go into this form of work just to survive, forced sex work to survive as young boys. We don't want to go into this stuff, but we need that fast money, otherwise we don't have a roof over our heads or food to eat in the day. But everybody can judge you with a roof over their head, parents who've looked after them, or family who looked after them, friends who looked after them, whatever it may be the case. They can sit with their silver spoon and judge everybody. And of course, when you make these decisions and go into this world, you will meet men who will be very violent towards you. Believe me, I know, I've discussed it many a times now, where they will do things to you that you don't want to do, or ask you to do things to them that you don't want to do. But there is a power of abuse there, especially when there's a huge age disparity. And so when these men, again, we're dealing with the same thing all over again. Philip, Hugh, Dan. What is the pattern here? You have grown men with an abuse of power, status, money, power, whatever you want to call it, who will use young workers or young teens to their own advantage and manipulate them, exploit them, and use them, and then abuse them, and then absolutely discard them in seconds because they don't need them anymore. And then these boys, like me, we're lost in the system. We have nowhere to go. We're riddled with so much ridiculous trauma, and it's absolutely chaotic for us. And so I absolutely can understand and adhere what this man is going through right now, even today, let alone back then when it happened. But these men are everywhere, whether it's in the industry or not in the industry. And because we're young boys, everyone just turns a blind eye, and it's a very sad situation. Yet again, for the third time, I feel like I'm raising awareness and speaking on this conversation about sexual abuse and grooming of young boys, or teen boys or sex worker boys, or whatever you want to call it, that grown men take advantage of, and then things end up happening. The fact that this Dan Wooton found a way to get into his room, did intense research on him, then put things in XYZ allegedly, R-worded him allegedly as well, and then had somebody else call him and got away with it is wild. This is beyond far worse than anything Philip Schofield has done or Hugh Edwards has done. So my question is, why isn't there the same backlash? Granted, Philip and Hugh are far bigger and well known than Dan, but these allegations are far worse than what's been discussed when it comes to the other two men. Far worse. And this is, in my opinion, this is probably the first of many. This hasn't even been 24 hours since it's come out, and it's accumulated over 3 million views on Twitter, and a lot of people are speaking about it as well. People are reacting, saying, I admire your strength and courage. Very brave of you as well. We've all made mistakes, Kevin. I'm sending you a big hug. Well done for being extremely brave and sharing such a horrific account. Someone else responded, saying, big hugs, Kevin. Someone said, I believe every word. The issue here is that, there's no evidence to when it comes to this. This is right now just an allegation. There's no evidence when it comes to this. And you need hardcore evidence in these circumstances. And this is why a lot of men get away with it. The question of, well, the police didn't investigate it, therefore nothing is there, doesn't always stand. There's not a lot of credibility to that statement, because when it comes to young, impoverished boys who are sex workers, who get manipulated and used by grown men who've got power and, a lot of money and etc., there's a high chance that nothing can be done, because what can you do? It's one word against the other person's. I am somebody who has dignity and wants to stand with a victim and stand with people who have, mirrored similar lives to me, and we end up making our own mistakes that we need to be responsible for as well. But as far as I'm concerned, when you don't harm somebody, that is all I care about. And what I'm seeing is Dan, is that this is a serious allegation, guys. The police just don't care. The police, unfortunately, just don't care. It's just so sad that they just don't care. It's very common as well. His statement, my memory is his crime scene. To me, that is one hell of a statement to make. My memory is his crime scene. Nobody defends our young boys. Nobody defends them. And then we come out with these kind of stories, or he comes up with these type of stories, and again, now there's shock in the system and etc. Like, it's just beyond wild. Shocking allegations, guys. Far worse than what was discussed last night about Dan Wooton and about anybody else so far publicly this year. Make of this information what you will, but I would think twice before defending somebody like Dan after somebody else has come out with this story. And that will say a lot about you as an individual if you are quick to do so or defend him or so forth. The conversation of, oh, there's no evidence. Well, if you were in a room and somebody had drugged you and R-worded you and left the room, and you ran to the police and they were like, sorry, there's no evidence, bye. How would that make you feel? Just think for a second. How would that make you feel? It's just absolutely wild. Let me know your thoughts on when it comes to this, guys. Subscribe to the channel, click that button. It is daily and consistent content. Please go and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. And I will catch you guys soon for another review.